Hello and welcome back to our channel. I'm delighted today to introduce you to Will, who is the newest person to join our team and whose previous experience really stands him in great stead for understanding and sympathizing with our clients. He also has one very, very special skill, and we'll introduce you to that a little bit later. Let's meet Will now. Will, you've just joined French Connections HCB. It's great to have you on board. How did joining the company come about? And also, what was your first impression of meeting us all?
So I was living in East Africa until the middle of 2024, so last year, and I bought a very old and rickety Range Rover, which I was looking to get back into France, or get to France rather. Anyway, I searched online, and one of the top names that came up was French Connections HCB. At the same time, my wife and I were looking to sort of move to France as well from Kenya. So one of the things French Connections can do is help you import your car to France. I went to French Connections. I got a quote as well. I ended up actually not taking the car back, and I left it in Kenya. But I had the name, the sort of FC HCB, sort of in the back pocket, I suppose. And then when it came to properly really like moving, I realized that because still of working age, I needed to find some sort of work. I was also leaving the army as well.
Mhm.
So I sent Richard, the CEO, I found his email address. I sent him an email with my CV, a couple of paragraphs about me. I wasn't actually asking for a job. I was just saying, where working age people kind of, or rather, you will not only just have retirees moving over.
Yeah.
Do you know where people find work? And not really expecting anything, to be honest, because it was one of those sort of just throw it out there and see what happens. And sure enough, within 30 minutes, I had a phone call from him. It was in the middle of another meeting. I had a call from him saying, I don't, I don't want you to work for anyone else. I'd like you to come work for me." And so we moved about a month later to France, and I based down in the Gers, and when we were chatting away on the phone, we kind of had a sort of bit of back and forth. And at the end of it, he said, "Look, where are you going to be based?" And I said, "Well, I'm actually going to be based in the Gers. It's a very obscure little pocket of France." And I said the village that we'll be living in, and I said, You probably won't know it." And he goes, "No, no, I know. I live about 20 minutes down the road from you." And it was just an extraordinary coincidence. So we got into France in August time, I think. I nipped down there to go and sort of meet him properly, have a cup of tea, and just to kind of get the lay of the land really. And then 4 or 5 hours later, I was still there. And I was having a drink with his family, really being brought into the team, I suppose, but certainly with that environment, and we just took it from there, And that was the middle of 2024, and I started it properly in earnest, beginning of 2025, so January. But there was so many overlaps, the
Yeah.
fact that he was 20 minutes down the road from us. His I think maternal side of the family, or sorry, his paternal side of the family is from Scotland, very, very nearby where my mother grew up. So that was another crossover, similar sort of age, and it was almost too good to be true. And so when we were kind of doing the dance and stuff, he said, "Look, December time's coming around. I still had a lot of things to do, kind of leaving my previous job." December time came around. He said, "Well, why don't you come to a show we're doing in London? We're doing it at the Landmark Hotel, like an expose, and it'd be a good chance for you to meet some clients, see kind of how we operate and what our business model is, and why we are so good at what we do. But really importantly, meet some of the other people that work for French Connections, yourself included, of course. You were there."
Absolutely.
So I sort of said, "Yeah, why not?" I'm sort of, it's a Saturday, don't have anything else planned. So I've got the train up to London, and then there I was, sort of in the middle of it all. And I met the team, and team with a big T as well. It was a really it was a wonderfully welcoming group to be sort of part of. There was this really fun buzz around
Mm.
about everything that we were doing, or everything, sorry, they were doing at the time, and we are now doing together. There was this true camaraderie, this true team vibe element to it that I really loved, and I was very conscious of wanting to have that. It's very important. It had been very important to me in my previous work, and I was nervous to not have it. And within seconds, I could see that the team were working for French Connections HCB was truly that. There was like there was a real mucking in. There was sort of, if any job was going, spare, someone would just jump in and say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of that." It might be way out of their job spec, their lane, their expertise, but I'll do it because I can. I've got capacity, and that I really loved. And also it was just great fun. Just really lovely people. So yeah, and I sort of thought I would really love to be part of this. And so I kind of held on for dear life, and then in early Feb I started working.
So it's interesting because I distinctly remember talking to you at the end of that day and asking your first impressions. And you mentioned team then. You mentioned how much of a team it felt. And that's something that you've really carried through, I think. It is a team indeed. And I can well imagine that in the army that sort of camaraderie was very important. But do you think that there were other things that came out of your army life, other attributes, other experiences that stand you in really good stead in this new role?
I think in general terms, you have two of the fundamental things that we really needed to. I certainly felt I needed to concentrate on within my army work.
Yeah.
Was the first thing is that the way we processed a plan, or the way we processed our output, was that you have your desired end state. So you say that is what we want to achieve, and then at this end you have all of your resources. Includes also your timeline, so like all of the factors that are included in your particular context, and then we would then do our best to sort of write a suitable plan, or operation or whatever, to match those resources to that end state, and then just go with it. And it was about that project management and sort of mission success. That's kind of what we were looking for, and it's very similar to what I feel like we do very well at French Connections. Is that often when I talk to new clients, I say, right guys, do the niceties, do a bit of admin, but I say to them, okay, I need to know two things. Firstly, what does good look like to you? So where do you want to be in 12 months' time, let's say, or rather, where do you want to be and by when? And then they tell me also some of their context, and we just work out a plan that best suits them to get there. And I think that's probably one of a really important kind of resource to end state, sort of mission style that I think would be transferable. And then secondly, our biggest resource in the military was our people, our personnel, and certainly my most recent role, I was involved very heavily with personnel management, so a lot of the pastoral stuff, and ultimately dealing with people all day, every day. And it was less numbers, more human beings, and so you have to have an empathy with every single person on an individual basis. Now, the problems are obviously different, but the recognition that having a very, very unique approach to each individual person remains the same. And that is what we do. I think, again, we do at French Connections, which is exactly that. Well, I found that anyway, which is that not one size fits all. Account managers and our legal team and so on, they have a very, very unique approach to each person, because each person is very, very different and has different demands and needs. And as I said, desired end states and good might look different to them as it does to someone else. And so that I think is probably one of the more valuable sort of transferable skills, if you will, or things that I have been lucky enough to have had a lot of practice in.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. And also, you must have moved around an awful lot in the army, moved from place to place. Do you think that has made you really empathize with people making this move to France, a move to another life, whereabouts were you moving to in the army? How did it make you feel?
Well, I loved it. I mean, it was a real adventure. There's no question, and I think it was a wonderful way to spend my 20s and sort of early 30s. Definitely, I really loved it. But there was an enormous amount of moving around, and the most recent posting, I was in East Africa, in Kenya, but before then I'd spent some time in North Africa and the Middle East, up in the Arctic with the Inuits, and with the Canadian Army. Where else have been? In London for a bit. I started off life in Aldershot, and then before then I was even at Sandhurst, and then you go to Wales for 4 months in the middle of all of that. So it's sort of constant. You're always on this wheel. But it was great. It was great fun. But at the same time, every time you move, you it requires a lot of administration, and you've got to manage your people and your kit and you've got it, depending on where you're going in the world, you've got to have 1,000,001 vaccinations, you've got to get particular passports sorted. There's a huge amount of stuff to sort out. It's a lot of it's all process driven. A lot of it is all very, very obvious and relatively binary, but you still have to do it nonetheless. And I think on reflection, it cannot be underestimated how stressful moving is. Be it county, country, or even continent, which many of our clients are doing. They're moving from another continent to Europe, or within Europe, but let's say from the UK to France. And if you could snap your fingers and have someone to just de-stress it all for you, I have to say I would have gone after them. I could never quite find those people, so I ended up doing it yourself. But I moved. I only did one or two moves with my family, which was from the UK to Kenya, then Kenya to France, and everything else was with either just myself or with a group of soldiers. Moving with soldiers actually is relatively stress-free comparative to moving your wife and small dog from East Africa to France, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it is never stress-free, and it always needs real ownership, proper understanding, like a real understanding of what is required. Because if you miss, often if you missed one thing in that chain of events, then it all falls apart. And so I think where French Connections has real value is doing just that. Is de-stressing the whole. We wear the stress for people who are moving, because often people are moving in retirement or midway through their working life, or they've just started they've just started a family, they've got young kids. It doesn't matter what stage of life you're in, there will be different stresses, and our expertise is in de-stressing that. And that's not because we're sort of particular geniuses at the whole process. I don't think it's just that the volume and the experience and the empathy of the team.
Yeah.
Both account managers and also the administration team it's really there. Like, it's a genuine thing, and there's a huge amount of integrity in that, which is our clients, I think, see that and understand it, and therefore value it as well.
I think so. And also, in your particular case, you've done what people are doing. You decided to move to France. I know your mother-in-law, I think, has lived locally in France for a while, but what made you and your wife decide to choose France, having lived in so many different places all around the world? What made you choose France?
We just moved to Kenya. We were back in France visiting my mother-in-law, as you say, and I think it was a Tuesday morning. We'd gone to play a game of tennis in the local tennis court. In every tiny village has its own beautifully maintained tennis court. So we played a game of tennis. We walked through. So we played that. We walked into town, went to the village. We grabbed a coffee at the cafe in the square. It was a beautiful kind of spring morning. I think the tennis racket was there, kind of rested on my leg or something, and the kids were lining up to go into the little primary school, and the boulangerie was busy with all of the farmers and the business people and everything coming through. And I thought, this is so wonderful. This is what, and this was all before 9 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I love this. This is exactly what I'm after. I want to de-stress my own life. I want to have this is the sort of routine that is truly magical. And it's the sort of thing that people really dream of. I mean, they talk about like your dream move, and it really is that. So we kind of got back to the house and had put our heads together and thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's just try. And so we did.
Love that what really inspired you, your moment, your eureka moment, was something so absolutely everyday, typical of a French village. It wasn't a huge show. It was just everyday life is what brings people here, isn't it? There's something we do want to be part of it, and we can be part of it. Very lucky. So I imagine then afterwards, house hunting, I guess. Did you start straight away?
The trip the following year, we organised a string of houses to go and visit. So we had a bit of a programme. And as you know, at Sod's Law, the first one we walked into, having had a whole five-day sort of thing planned, was the one we totally fell in love with. And again, it was a very, very simple thing. We walked into a sleepy square, beautifully maintained kind of medieval square, in a small village, and and I can't remember. It was just again, it was like the light hit the side of the building. It was sort
Yeah.
of that sort of mid-morning light. You know what I mean? And it was there. Walked in. I thought, wow, this place is truly special. Really, really special. I mean, it was not habitable, but it was very, very special nonetheless. And so we sort of made our intentions known, I suppose. But again, had to wait for quite a lot of time before
Yeah.
we could do anything properly. And the serendipity of all of these things is it can't be understated. But we got back to Kenya, and we're able to buy the house from distance. So we had a
Fantastic.
brilliant notary who helped us all the way through, spoke very good English, and thankfully my wife speaks French anyway, so that's quite handy. But we sort of did it all like this, via Zoom, and we rather peculiarly, obscurely, we saw our sort of or like our completion documents being signed by someone we'd never met before. I don't think we even saw her face. It was like the back of her head. She walked into an office, signed it, and then left again. And then
All the
there we
while
are.
you're sitting in Nairobi.
Yeah, sort of
It's
tapping our
just so
fingers.
funny, isn't it?
Yeah, thinking, well, wow, we now own a we now own a house. That's kind of mad, really. But
And
it was just. Yeah, it's a really wonderful adventure, and it's a real dream, and we're sort of we're doing it, which is great.
so living in the house or renovations nearly finished?
Renovations are ongoing, and yeah, I think I may have said to you before, it's a funny old thing. You walk in there on a Monday because it had been it was a house prior to moving in. It was used for something else, and so we completely gutted it. And it had a roof, it had a front door, and most of the doors and windows closed, so that was positive. And it was
Small
safe on the whole.
victories.
Yeah, exactly. Small victories. But that when you go in there on a Monday and you think there's just stuff everywhere, wires and damp and all sorts, and you think, no way can any human being, any animal live in this building safely. And by Thursday or Friday, after plaster's been in, the sparky's been in, the builder's been in, it almost looks like a house. And so we're very, very close. We've got a few things happening over the next fortnight, and I'd like to think we'll be in there by my birthday, which is in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So that's what I'm
I
looking
will
for.
keep my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fingers crossed for you. And now
We're
we
almost
have to
there.
talk about something else that's going to come as a big surprise to your village, I think. You have a special skill. Tell us about your special skill, and we will definitely tag on a bit of it at the end for people to see.
So I can play the bagpipes. So yeah. And I have played the bagpipes since I was 12.
Gosh.
As I said earlier, yes, I grew up in Scotland, and so the national instrument is a pretty special instrument to be able to play. But yeah, that's what I play. So as you say, it will be a surprise to some of our neighbours. But one side of the house is the school, and the other side is a very elderly lady. So hopefully she might not be able to hear me quite so easily. Um,
I can see you're going to be in huge demand, though, once people find out, because it is a very evocative instrument, isn't it? And if you think, I imagine in your little village square, as in mine, that's where every event happens. Every event happens. Any opportunity, something's happening in the square, and that's where the music starts. So I look forward to seeing some footage of you once you are up there center stage, making people fall in love with the bagpipes.
it's a very, very difficult instrument to practice in private. So essentially, I have to be at peace with the fact that as soon as I have that first practice, my cover is blown, and that's it. I've started a new chapter in life, and I just have to accept it.
Well, I'm looking forward to be able to show. I know you've recorded a piece for us to share with the clients, so we will definitely be doing that. Let's talk now a little bit about your new role, in fact, because you are going to be the person that people call and talk to. Do you want to explain a bit?
So new role. So I am the senior client consultant, and I do a bit of work with existing clients, but where really I get seen most will be with new clients who have booked a free 30-minute consultation using either the website, links to our YouTube channel, and various other channels. So it's a free 30-minute conversation or consultation, really, and that really is an opportunity for me to understand where someone is coming from, what they're looking to achieve, but really also for me to say to them, okay, well, I know about you. This is how French Connections can help you, and we'll go through a timeline. We'll go through the services that may be of use, and it's really about navigating the start of that partnership. And the partnership, that can go on from just quickly get a visa to all the way through to long term, to citizenship and nationalization, which is sort of 5, 10 years down the line. So it's a very, very important initial triage of
Yeah.
how we're going to really help each other.
And I think you are specializing also in visas, aren't you? Which is exciting because if you're the first point of contact, you're also the first part of the journey of moving to France for many people, aren't you? In that nothing can happen without a visa.
Exactly. Well, it is utterly critical, obviously, and so the getting the visa element right is really, really important, because if you get the right visa, then everything else falls into place. My initial my where I will try and specialize in my consulting will be within visas and immigration,
Yep.
because that's the pinch point, and if we get that right, then everything else falls into place. And so that's where we'll start.
Fantastic. And just before we go, just tell us a tiny little bit about what it was like to work at Buckingham Palace.
Um, it was pretty unique, I have to say. The so my role, I was the second in command of one of the companies, which is 100 soldiers plus, and we were based in Wellington Barracks, which was right next door to Buckingham Palace. But one of our main roles was doing the Queen's Guard. At the time, it was the Queen's Guard. Obviously, now it's King's Guard. So bearskins, tunics, bagpipe band, and the guard changes over several times a week.
Mhm.
And when we were on parade and I was on parade with my soldiers, you'd march from Wellington Barracks onto Buckingham Palace, do the ceremony, and then you'd end up inside Buckingham Palace, and sometimes in St James's Palace or Windsor. It was amazing. I mean, marching through a crowd of sometimes 5, 6,000 people as they're all looking on, and doing things like the Queen's birthday parade and stuff. Someone asked me the other day, what was it like standing still for that long? And I said, it was kind of difficult to really understand what it felt like. But the only thing I remember so clearly is that I have never been so aware of my knees before. The desperation for them not to buckle. It's unbelievable. I could really I could truly feel them. It was the strangest feeling. And then of course someone shouts something, and everyone turns to the right, turns to the left, whatever, and you sort of get a bit of a respite. But no, it was wonderful. It was a true honor as well, because it's not a role that everyone gets to do. And I did it for a year and a half or so. I worked with some amazing soldiers. And so yeah, it was great fun. Great fun.
I love the contrast between Buckingham Palace, Nairobi, and now this little medieval village in France.
That's right,
It's truly
extraordinary.
great to have you on board, Will. I'm so glad you're part of the team. I'm so glad we got the chance to talk and introduce you
Brilliant.
to potential clients. And we'll leave all the contact details down below and end with a lovely snippet of you playing a little bit of the bagpipes. Thank you,
Thanks,
Will.
Lizzie. Great to
Good.
speak.